Hey everybody, welcome to NYC Media Lab. I'm your host, Manoush Zomorodi. I am here to help us celebrate the 20th anniversary birthday of Wikipedia. It's super exciting. I'll just introduce myself very quickly. I'm the host of NPR's TED Radio Hour. I host another show called Zigzag, which is the business show about being human, bit of a media entrepreneur, but mostly I'm a lover and a fan of the mission behind Wikipedia, which is why I am so excited to be joined by the CEO of the Wikimedia Foundation, Katherine Maher. And welcome, Katherine.
Hey Manish, it's great to be here. Thanks for doing this with us.
Oh, I love you guys. So first of all, happy birthday, I guess.
Yeah, we call it a birthday. Yeah, I think it speaks to the fact that this really is this human project that we call it a birthday instead of an anniversary. You know, the fact this like idea that there's something about us that is more like people perhaps than a tech site.
I love that. So Katherine, here's what we're going to do. You and I are going to talk for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to take some questions from the audience. Does that work for you?
That totally works.
Okay, great. So what I wanted to do was sort of start out, 20 years, that's like, I don't know, a junior in college, basically. That's turning into an adult. Can you tell us a little bit about the evolution of Wikipedia? Because it started in an unusual way and has progressed in an unusual way.
Yeah, I think the fun thing about Wikipedia is that it didn't even start as Wikipedia. It started as something called Newpedia, which was an effort by Jimmy Wales, our founder, to create an encyclopedia that was really traditional in many ways, but just online. So with a peer review process where people would submit articles, experts would review, and that project to get Newpedia up and running sort of was a little bit slower than Jimmy expected. So alongside, he created a space where people could submit drafts of articles using something called a wiki, which is a type of software. And that wiki software, which is essentially allowed for quick collaborative editing on the internet, quickly resulted in lots of articles. And they were of like varying quality and stuff, but it was very clear that there was a lot more energy in this idea that people could submit these drafts. And so Jimmy, seeing a good thing happening, quickly pivoted and created Wikipedia, which has since grown into what we see today, which is more than 55 million articles across 300 languages, used by lots and lots of people, more than 1.5 billion devices every single month from around the world. And so, the way that I think of this is we started as a little bit of a sort of a happy accident. And today we're still kind of a happy accident, this example of things that folks can do together that's certainly grown beyond our wildest expectations, really.
So can you explain, I think some people think like, oh, it's these random dudes sitting in their basements updating pages. Like, who are the people who make Wikipedia?
Yeah, it is not random dudes sitting in their basements, although I'm sure we do have a few folks who sit in basements. Yeah, like it's reasonable. I'm sitting in an attic right now. Everyone creates Wikipedia. And what I mean by that is we are really sort of in this theoretical sort of abstract way of project that we all do together. When you read Wikipedia, you are validating how important it is that we have access to free information. We have nearly 78 million donors around the globe who make Wikipedia possible by donating small contributions. But I think at the core of what you're getting at is this editing community that supports Wikipedia. And that's the volunteers who contribute day in and day out to write the articles, maintain their quality, ensure that the whole thing sort of looks and feels like an encyclopedia, support the free software that runs it. And they're everyone. They're grandparents and school children. They are on every continent, including Antarctica, because those Arctic days are long and not a lot of sun. And scientists are right in there with Wikipedia. They're medical doctors. They're stewards of cultural institutions and curators. They're grad students. They're just pretty much everyone you can imagine contributes to Wikipedia from all sorts of different walks of life. So yeah, I totally understand where this sort of stereotype comes from, but I do think it's a little bit of something that should be left in the past as we celebrate this new birthday, as we see what Wikipedia has really become.
So, of course, in this last year of the foundation and the site's life, hugest news story, global virus pandemic. How on earth have you and the team, and also the contributors and editors, dealt with covering the virus? I mean, it felt like nearly every moment we were learning something new.
Yeah, I think that's right. And it was what really made this so unusual. I mean, there are breaking news stories that happen all around the world, but they tend to be kind of one and done. I mean, when we think about something like a natural disaster or a major political event, it happens over the course of a day or maybe two, and then we really move into sort of a recovery phase. And Wikipedia covers that as the event is unfolding, and then it really looks at building out with richness. With this COVID-19 pandemic, as you pointed to, it was a novel virus. We didn't know anything about it. And so every single day was a breaking news event, at least at the beginning. And I think it stressed the capacity of the community to respond. But the good news is that we have a very well-established community of editors from our Wiki Project Med community, which is a group of medical doctors and researchers and people who care very deeply about the integrity of public health information, who'd kind of gone through something similar before with the Ebola crisis in West Africa in the middle of the last decade. And so that was almost ended up being a little bit of a dry run of how do you stay on top of a rapidly changing environment? How do you ensure that the quality of information is really high across multiple different languages? And really thinking about how do you take responsibility for information in a low information environment and fill those gaps so that people have what they need. The way that we do this in the Wikimedia project, the way that our editors do, is they first mapped all the different articles that were being created, and then they built what are called bots to be able to track automatically what changes were happening and then just keep an eye on what was going on. I think the most unusual innovation with all of this was that of the 3,000 plus articles that were created around the COVID-19 pandemic was the creation of an article about the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, we are at a place where, fortunately, we're actually very close to the rollout of a vaccine for the world. At the time, there was a lot of misinformation happening around whether or not a vaccine existed. And Wikipedians took the unusual step of creating a page for that vaccine to talk about all the efforts underway to create it, even though none existed, which really is a unique example of stepping up to fill a gap in information, despite the fact that technically the subject of that article didn't exist yet. And so I'm really curious how we as a project will learn from that experience going forward as we think about how to tackle other big challenges around information gaps and misinformation.
Yeah, I mean, that to me seems like a lesson that anybody watching should take on board. If you are part of a media organization or a journalist, what are the things that you might be reporting on? How can you fill the vacuum now with essentially a placeholder, is what you're saying, to make sure that fake news, as it's called, doesn't fill that void?
Yeah, and actually the term that you used just now, void, I think is how researchers think about this. They think of it as data voids where, you might be searching for information online, and instead of finding good information that says the vaccine doesn't exist, you might find lots of misinformation. And this is true in almost every breaking news context. I actually think it's one of those places where Wikipedia is so complementary to traditional media that focuses on how to cover world events, because Wikipedia stays in sort of a fixed context-oriented position that tries to give a holistic perspective, whereas most of the work of most journalists and media organizations is really trying to cover what's happening at any given moment. And so when you pair those two things of the any given moment plus what do we know thus far, it tends to work really well in a complementary way to help people have the context they need to understand what's going on around them.
Now, I want to get way more into the mis and disinformation thing, but can I just ask you, like, when you hear from people, clearly there are people who are paid and are on the Wikimedia Foundation payroll, but what do you hear from the people who contribute to Wikipedia about what motivates them? Because what you're describing is, sourcing, painstaking work, hours of work, and it sounds like a real commitment to verification in addition to contribution of information.
What motivates them? it always sounds a little impossible when I say it, but truly what motivates most people is this desire to contribute to this greater mission that Wikimedia has, which is free knowledge for the world. And the sort of value that underlies that for many people when you speak to them is this idea that knowledge can help improve people's lives, make the world a better place, a place of greater understanding. And so it seems almost sort of perhaps naively optimistic, and yet I think that that is at the heart of what brings people back hour after hour to these contributions. And sometimes we're really talking many hours in the course of a week or a year. The other piece about it is, a range of different motivations that are fundamentally human. Sometimes it's, I'm an expert in this and I'd like to demonstrate my expertise. Sometimes it's, hey, that's wrong and I'm right. That sort of thing that animates us from the time we're children. These combination of motivations taken together create the motivations that enable Wikipedia to thrive. And so it sort of plays on both our best and some of our worst inclinations in a way that comes together to create a whole that actually works pretty well for the world.
Okay, let's talk about the worst inclinations. We have seen rampant misinformation and disinformation. So, purposefully wrong information to mislead people, other people who perhaps spread theories that they think are correct. How do you, how do you keep track of mistakes or falsehoods? How do you correct them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be the first to say Wikipedia is not we don't think of ourselves as a purely authoritative source. We're very clear on the fact you should check the citations, you should do your additional research, read us with a critical eye. We think you should read everything with a critical eye. But the way that this happens is particularly for articles of great public note, whether those are politics or COVID vaccine or any other, sometimes of religion, for example, Wikipedians tend to be attuned to the things that are topics of controversy, and they can either determine this based on the number of page views or the amount of editing attention. And what happens is every single page that's edited frequently has a number of people who watch it. And what I mean by this is literally a feature you can add a page to your watch list. And so any edit that's made triggers a notification for all these Wikipedians all over the world who then come and check what that edit was. Was that a good edit? Is it well cited? Does this seem like it's some sort of vandalism or some sort of point of view pushing? Is this trying to manipulate people's information? And over the course of hundreds of thousands of edits on a particular article, tens or hundreds of people looking at that article, you tend to end up with a pretty good sort of crowd evaluation of how this all works. And it means that vandalism, and Stanford actually just put out a piece all about how this works in a political context just today in honor of Wikipedia's 20th birthday. It mostly works. I want to be clear, it's imperfect. There are sometimes times in which an article is in development, it's a work in progress, but that system of notification and review with enough people across enough time zones, across enough political perspectives, walks of life, and persuasions ensures a way of forcing folks into a zone of consensus and agreement, even about really hard subjects. It also helps that every single mistake that's made to Wikipedia can be quickly reverted if it's proven to be wrong or inaccurate, just back to the way the article used to be.
I think one of the things that's fascinated me too is that you actually keep a record of how each page has changed. So, for future historians and as we look forward to the next 20 years of Wikipedia, what sort of role is that? One of the roles that the site has to play? Where do you see the sort of position that Wikipedia needs to own in the next 20 years when it comes to facts and information and knowledge?
Just a small question. No, I think, So I love the fact that what you just referenced, we have a record of almost every edit that's ever been made to Wikipedia. There are these talk pages that are used to be able to debate the subject of an article itself outside the main page that's presented to the public. Those are all records of the compilation of knowledge. They are incredibly important documents as to how subjects change in the public perspective over time. Wikipedia is edited on average 350 times a minute, which means that 350 times a minute, people are engaging in robust debate about what we think is known. Over time, that actually builds up to this tremendous record of what we as society value, how our perspectives shift over time, who has been excluded and what has been excluded from Wikipedia's record. We think that these insights, not just what's on the talk page or what's in the edit history, but also the insights of how topics are connected, the distribution of coverage globally, these are all important matters to the historical record, as well as important for us to be able to interrogate now, so we have a better understanding of our own understanding of the world. There's this whole sort of theory of knowledge that says it's not just what's known, it's actually what's not known that reveals quite a lot about a society. And I think that that was what makes Wikipedia really exciting as a project, is that it is constantly open for change. And so when we have the opportunity to interrogate what we don't know, we can actually just go ahead and think about how to change that. So yeah, I think that what is beautiful about Wikipedia is that it reflects our human biases in some really problematic ways, but it also reflects our aspirations for what it is that we can do better.
I mean, I think that's why I'm such a huge fan, is it keeps the fire, the flame of the original purpose of the internet alive for me in so many ways. I need that these days. All right, let's go to some questions. Let's see here. Oh, interesting. Okay, so Ken C. at Bloomberg wants to know what opportunities have surfaced for Wikimedia, meaning the foundation, as a result of the massive remote working during the pandemic. So maybe as part of that, Katherine, you could just quickly clarify Wikimedia, the foundation, versus Wikipedia.
Absolutely.
Or I should say in tandem.
Or together, yeah.
Yes.
So the Wikipedia is our best known, what we call free knowledge project. It is the encyclopedia. The Wikimedia Foundation is the parent organization that hosts the servers, develops the software, supports the community, raises the money to ensure that Wikipedia can exist. We also support a number of other free knowledge projects like Wikimedia Commons, which is a large image and media repository, Wikidata, which is an open data project. And so Wikimedia is meant to be like all media should be free and accessible to the public. It's all a form of knowledge. And so that's who we are. In this pandemic, I think we were already a very distributed organization to begin with. Part of serving 300 languages and all these folks all over the globe is, if you're going to be able to serve that, you need to recruit folks who resemble those audiences, who can speak those languages, who understand those cultures, those needs. This has just accelerated that trend for us in many ways. I'm looking forward to coming out of this pandemic, however, because one of the things that's very true about remote work, particularly across countries, cultures, time zones, is it does help to get together every now and then, I think.
For sure. Okay, let's see. Jamie J. at the Society Library asks, what types of organizations do you think Wikipedia should be partnering with? I like that question.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I think we've gone from a very individual contributor model where somebody decides they want to be an editor, they click edit and go for it, to an organization that now has a role to play in partnering with other knowledge institutions. And I use that very broadly. It's not just museums and libraries, it's anybody who is in the business of creating knowledge for the world. Because of the fact that Wikipedia is such a first stop on the internet to so many different things, we'd love the opportunity to partner more institutionally with anyone who has reliable information that would help inform the public. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been partnering with the WHO, the World Health Organization, to ensure that we have the best, most up-to-date quality information about that pandemic. We also have ongoing partnerships with institutions like the Metropolitan Museum in New York, as well as many others around the globe. I would be happy to partner with any institution, from an institution of dance in the Philippines to an institution of astronomy in Norway to be able to capture the knowledge that they have, help elevate it to the public so that folks can discover that knowledge on our sites and then click through our citations to go deeper into that institution's records, history, learning. We really just see ourselves as a gateway that can help facilitate deeper learning. So the answer is pretty much everyone. Librarians, you name it, we're here.
Would you say that you already, in some ways, unofficially partner with media outlets and journalists all over the world, simply by virtue of the fact that they make up the majority of the citations on the site?
It's an interesting way to think about it. I don't know. I call it a partnership in the way that, it's a collaboration is perhaps a better way to think about it. There's no question in my mind that Wikipedia exists as part of a knowledge ecosystem, and we are deeply invested in the health and well-being of that knowledge ecosystem. We wouldn't exist without citations. And so for us, attacks on the free press are an attack on the knowledge ecosystem. Funding cuts to research, scientific research, are an attack on the knowledge ecosystem. We believe very strongly in the need for knowledge institutions globally, whether they're cultural institutions, like you mentioned the example of dance earlier, or research institutions in genetic sequencing. All of that together is what comprises human knowledge, and Wikipedia exists really as a way of summarizing it for a general public so that folks can have a level of basic understanding that allows them to go much deeper into what their passions or curiosities might be.
Okay, I think we have time for a couple more questions. Let me have a look. This is a good one too. How do you think the climate of mis and disinformation affects our psyche individually as citizens and collectively as a nation? Can we address the skepticism and cynicism caused by mis and disinformation? I mean, we are at a crisis point, certainly here in the United States, when it comes to who believes what.
We are, and it's something we've seen globally as well, as you well know. When we speak with our community members everywhere from India to Brazil to the United States, this is a common refrain. I have to say, in the short term, I am not certain what the path through is, other than to continue to do the work to support the production of information and to validate the roles in society of information producers. I was thinking about this the other day. I read an interview with Dr. Anthony Fauci, who's, of course, leading some of the efforts on the pandemic in the United States. And he said that there's a reaction to authority right now. And I wonder if that's not a reason why Wikipedia has been as successful in this moment as it has, is that we don't present ourselves as an authority. We present ourselves very consciously as a work in progress. I think if we can continue to hold that space so that we can continue to be reliable and serve that function of foundational education on a wide range of topics, that's a truly important place for us to be. The place where I will stay optimistic is I do believe that the value of knowledge has proven to be an enduring value for humanity. It is our innate curiosity that is part of what makes us human. It leads us to seek and to explore and to discover, both in our, down to the molecular level and out into the universe. And knowledge is the record of all of that seeking and that curiosity. Goes back centuries, it crosses countries and cultures and languages, and under pressure, in fact, when we know that it actually sharpens in many ways and strengthens. There's much in the historical record that shows when people are pressured to abandon ways of curiosity or knowledge seeking, they actually become more resilient and more defiant in pursuit of that. And so I am not sure what the path forward is in an environment of misinformation that swirls around the web today. I do believe that validating the importance of knowledge seeking and the importance of testing our assumptions and hypotheses and engaging in disagreement in ways that are productive is how we go forward. I wish I could be a little more optimistic, Manoush. I wish I had the solutions there. I'm afraid I don't.
Yeah. My hope is, to me, it's when you make learning fun and when you fall down a Wikipedia rabbit hole and your curiosity gets the best of you and you just look up and you're like, oh my God, I learned all these crazy things. Like I did not expect to know like why Brigadoon was produced. You know what I mean? Just like random stuff that you find out. And learning is fun. I feel like if we can get that message out. I certainly, I was so thrilled when my son, who's 13, said to me, he's like, Mom, Wikipedia just asked for money. We got to quickly give them money. And I was like, no, babe, don't worry. That'll pop up again. But he felt so strongly about it. And I was like, okay, that's like doing an okay job if he's psyched about Wikipedia and about facts.
I mean, I think there's truth to that, that when information is something that you explore on your own, and that's what I meant about this sort of lack of authority, when it feels engaging, even we know that even a little rough around the edges, there's research that shows that when Wikipedia articles are imperfect, more people are likely to edit them because they see the places where their contribution might make a difference. And so creating space for learning and exploration that enables people to go on that journey feels like a powerful way into this. I think my challenge is how do you do this at scale? And also, I think there's a real question. There's the flip side to this is some of that learning and exploration is part of how we end up with conspiracy theories as people seek to put together puzzle pieces that may or may not actually go together. And that to me is the tension of where it's so critical for us to be able to return the institutions, those who do the work of producing knowledge to the public conversation in a way that validates the importance of their work as opposed to the demonization of that production.
Let me get one more question here. We have seen, this person asks, and I think this is on a lot of media people's minds, we've seen a significant change in consumers who are now willing to pay for their content, be it the New York Times or niche publications or Substack. What do you see for Wikipedia's revenue expansion or diversification, especially as you're completing or have just completed a donation drive? It's true. The financials of media have never been kind, but they perhaps have never been harsher either right now.
Yeah, I know. It goes back to what we were saying about how important the media ecosystem is to the overall knowledge ecosystem. The thing that is very unusual about Wikipedia is that it is viewed by so many hundreds of millions of people around the globe, and we do survive or even thrive on small donations from millions of people. Now, you'll note that I said hundreds of millions and millions of people. There is a significant subset of folks who donate relative to the number of folks who read. It's significantly smaller, rather. What I think is the case for us is that we've been able to be successful by asking for folks for the app for $3, the cup of coffee is the standard banner that folks think of. That small donor model is so key to our integrity and our independence. It feels to us that by ensuring that we are accountable to the folks who support us, we do not have to be we're not under pressure to fulfill ad quotas or to track your information or to present you with information we think that you'll like, nor does it mean that we will, and it means that it helps us be able to withstand pressure, political pressure from large governments or individual entities to take down, to censor information, because our accountability is to you, it's to our donor, that our integrity is paramount. At the same time, I think we are interested in exploring the ways that as Wikipedia enters into the knowledge ecosystem more broadly, it's reused by many different people around the world and also many larger institutions. How might these institutions or companies be able to also give back to the commons, which is what we view ourselves to be a part of? Knowledge production isn't free, as you just noted. The financials of the media industry are hard. That's true for every form of knowledge production, from culture to research. We'd love to find a way to be able to benefit from the reuse of Wikipedia content financially in a way that could support knowledge production writ large. I don't quite know what that looks like yet, but it does seem to me that it would be a fair deal to ask people who use the commons for a profit-oriented outcome to be able to invest in the commons so it remains resilient and available to all. And perhaps most importantly, broadens out to include those who it doesn't yet serve, which we know are many, many billions of people around the globe.
I mean, you probably can't tell me this, but I am curious if there are any Silicon Valley billionaires who have made any donations. We have seen them be interested in media over the last couple of years. It's Jeff Bezos. Maybe he shouldn't have bought the Washington Post. Maybe he should have just made a big donation to you.
I mean, I can. We're very transparent about where our money comes from. 85% of our funding comes from small dollar donations, and then the rest comes from foundations and larger gifts. But in general, what we found is that the sort of Silicon Valley billionaires think we probably should have sold ads, and so they don't tend to donate to us quite as much. I think that, you know, our goal there anyway is to not be beholden to any one individual. It's really to think about how do we build sustainability into the core of our model of production so that we can always maintain that integrity, so that we can be in service to people, you know, in service to the citizens who read us, support us, and use us every day. But yeah, if you're interested, it's all very transparent. We've gotten a few larger donations over the years.
Check it out. Okay, so let's wrap up here. What you are most excited about over the next, let's not say 20 years, that just seems like too much. How about over the next year? Let's just keep it, you know, there's no projecting out here right now. We clearly cannot plan. But over the next year, what is the biggest challenge that you want to address? And what are you most what's keeping you going?
Yeah, well, I mean, Manoush, look, we're wild optimists here. We wouldn't have built this encyclopedia. So we actually did do this whole 10-year plan to 2030. What we our biggest area of, you know, I think the things that I am most optimistic around are sort of threefold. One is we are used primarily by folks in North America and Europe, and we wildly underserve folks in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, in Southeast Asia. And so we're really investing in growing our engagement in support of the communities that exist there, communities of volunteers, because we feel as though, you know, that is where the world is continuing to grow, and there are real knowledge needs in that space. The second piece is, I just talked a little bit about our technology. Right now we're a website, but it's true the way we seek knowledge is now voice assistants and all sorts of other form factors. I don't know where that's going to go. So evolving our underlying tech stack to be able to serve that need is of critical importance to us. And then I think the last piece is, as I mentioned earlier, there's so many folks who are not represented in the way knowledge is presented today. Women, people of color, marginalized communities, indigenous communities. We are invested in what we think of as knowledge equity, which is a way of really talking about the structures that have excluded folks from participating in knowledge and shaping what we understand of the world, bringing that to the forefront of our mission. So yes, we have the canon, and also we're really thinking about how to integrate and reconcile that with a broader history and view on what knowledge is.
So much work for us all to do, but you know what? It's nice to take a moment to celebrate 20 years. You don't hear that often. So congratulations to you and your team and to all the contributors out there. And thank you for coming to celebrate with us, Katherine. We really appreciate it. Thank you so much to NYC Media Lab for hosting our celebration and sharing of knowledge. And thank you for being here, being part of the community. I hope you enjoyed having a little bit of optimism and wonder and celebration of good information and knowledge with me. I'm Manoush Zomorodi. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.